Your angel of death awaits.
You ain't the Bat!
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Your angel of death awaits.
The joke is on me. You're not Batman after all. Looks like there's a new face in Gotham.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. And recently, I've stated my love for what I consider to be the greatest Batman movies of all time. Those, of course, being Batman Under the Red Hood, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, Batman Returns, and Batman The Long Halloween, Parts 1 and 2. And in almost every single one of those videos' comment sections, I have someone correcting me, telling me that they aren't in fact the best Batman movies, because Mask of the Phantasm is. To which I say, maybe. I actually haven't seen Mask of the Phantasm since I was a kid. And back then, I don't think I really had the attention span one would need to appreciate said movie. Whether that be from immaturity or ADHD, one or the other, I couldn't do it. I watched it once, I don't remember a whole lot of it. I've been meaning to give it a second chance and rewatch it, but for some reason, this is one of the Batman projects that keeps on passing me by. I keep telling myself to check it out, and now that I have all of you telling me to check it out as well, I think that's what I'm gonna do. So let's find out if Batman the Mask of the Phantasm is the best Batman story ever put to the big screen.
Welcome, Paisan!
The movie bobs back and forth between past and present, and sometimes it does so pretty subtly. It works well for me, and I enjoy the way the narrative unfolds, but it also doesn't seem to be the best fit for a first-time viewer. The pacing and lack of action does sometimes lead to the movie feeling a little bit more sluggish early on, but I think that slow build is worth the wait. I'll be honest, I love Batman. I love Bruce Wayne, but I'm usually not all that interested in seeing his transition into becoming the Dark Knight. I'm so used to seeing that song and dance that, quite frankly, I'm over it. Personally, I prefer seeing a much more experienced Batman because, to me, that's what makes him more dangerous. The longer he's been out on the job, the more ways he has to inflict punishment. But to this movie's credit, I actually found myself pretty invested in an origin story that I already knew the ending to. Actually, the flashbacks to what happened prior to the start of the animated series were probably my favorite parts of the movie. I love the little details that the writers and the animators added in to let the audience know when this takes place. Like seeing Harvey Bullock as an officer prior to being a detective. Or having Alfred sport a half a head of black hair rather than his usual bright white. Or how Bruce doesn't have his Batman voice down just yet. These changes, while seemingly minor, really help set the scene. Really quick, I'm gonna go straight into spoilers here. Andrea Beaumont is the Phantasm. And throughout the rest of this video, I will be going back and forth referring to her by both names. I say spoiler, but this really shouldn't be a spoiler at all. Because the movie makes it as painfully obvious as humanly possible before the reveal comes. I'm not trying to throw shade or anything, but there have been less obvious reveals in old Scooby-Doo episodes. The focal point of this movie is the relationship between Bruce Wayne and Andrea Beaumont, the connection between Batman and the Phantasm. One gripe I have with this movie is that I think the love story aspect was a little bit rushed. And considering that this isn't happening on an episode of the animated series, but instead a full-length movie, I don't really think it had to be. Bruce and Andrea fall in love after knowing each other for all of 5 seconds. They have 2 brief interactions with each other and they're like, oh shit, I guess this is the one. That is not always the way that works. It usually is not. Don't buy any of this Disney shit. You take your time and you know who you're with. Just remember, you actually have to know a person in order to fall in love with a person. Honestly, I don't hate this pairing at all. It's no Bruce and Selina, but at least it's not Bruce and Talia. There's some real chemistry here. And because of that, I can see them working as an item. As a viewer, I want to see them work as an item. My issue isn't with the 2 people in the relationship, it's how fast that relationship was put together. I'm just trying to say it happens immediately, and unlike the spoiler I just gave you, this one came without warning. But aside from that, I really like the Batman Phantasm dynamic. The 2 are similar in so many ways. First off, aesthetically, the 2 are cut from the same cloth. And that same cut cloth apparently went into making both of their capes. They both wear costumes that are made to terrify those who they oppose. And those they oppose are a part of the criminal underworld of Gotham City. They're both vigilantes that crave justice so much that they're willing to play judge and jury. The only difference is that one of them is even willing to play executioner. They both take to the Gotham City rooftops at night. They both physically and figuratively fight crime. The two even have similar fighting styles. And ultimately, once we learn who's behind the mask, we know that both Batman and the Phantasm are doing all that they do to avenge their families. Both Bruce and Andrea are mourning loved ones, losses that neither ever really fully got over. Both of them had their parents murdered by the mob. And personality-wise, the two complement each other quite well. They're both articulate, intelligent, sarcastic individuals. But despite all of these many similarities, it's their very few differences that really set them apart. Ultimately, while the two are trying to avenge their families, their means of doing so, to the untrained eye, may look the same, but they actually couldn't be any more different. While both are passionate about fighting crime, they go about it in very different ways. Batman is out seeking justice, while the Phantasm is out seeking revenge. Andrea is more than willing to take a few lives in avenging her father, whereas Bruce is decidedly not. Batman is definitely deeply invested in what he does. The Phantasm is consumed by vengeance, letting her hatred of those who wronged her become her sole reason for existing. By the end of the movie, despite their differences and conflicting interests, there's still clearly a lot of love there. The two would like to be together, but they know that they've gone down different paths in life, and those paths will never reconnect. This is an absolutely tragic tale that properly adds on to Batman's origin. It's a sad inclusion to an already sad story. Their separate methods of purging their fixation are what keeps them apart. The movie impressively sets Bruce up in a relationship that you actually want to see succeed. But you know won't. Because our boy here, our poor boy here, can never be happy. We gotta keep him sad. They're two people in love that you want to see make it out together, but know that they desperately need to be kept apart. And I think what I love most about this movie is that it kind of ends on a downer. We don't get the big Hollywood happy ending stories like this usually set up. We don't even get the, oh, maybe there's more to this ending that we get in typical Batman and Catwoman stories. Come on, you know the one. This ending feels so much more definitive and final than that. This isn't a see you later. This is a goodbye. For good. This movie dangles all hope of Bruce Wayne living a normal life in front of both his and our faces, and then just shoots it down like it was the Waynes walking down Crime Alley. Personally, my biggest takeaway from this movie is, wow, the Phantasm is kind of fucking awesome. Why wasn't more done with her? I want you to understand that this character has all of 2 appearances in this entire canon. This whole animated universe that consists of things like Batman the Animated Series, The New Batman Adventures, Batman Beyond, Superman the Animated Series, Static Shock, Justice League Unlimited, the Zeta Project, some other things that I'm probably forgetting about right now. In all of that, she makes just 2 appearances. One being the titular character in the first theatrical animated Batman movie, the movie we're talking about, and the other in an episode of Justice League Unlimited, where she has no dialogue. What a shame. In recent memory, I believe that she made her debut finally in a Batman comic. I can't say that I've picked it up and read it just yet, but after watching this movie, I am definitely looking forward to doing such. While the Phantasm is clearly the big draw here, a lot of attention is also put on the Joker, who plays a pretty significant role in the Phantasm's upbringing. I'm not really a fan of Joker's non-origin here. But then again, I'm not really a fan of most Joker backstories, to be fair. Ideally, like a lot of you, I think his past is best left to mystery. Or, at the very least, multiple choice. You know, a choose-your-own-origin adventure. You see, I like to hear these Joker stories, but I don't like his come-up being set in stone. The Joker is the ultimate unreliable narrator, and therefore everything we know about his lore should be taken with a grain of salt. And that's the way I like it. maybe there are some seeds of truth in what he says. Or maybe the whole thing is a fabrication. Mask of the Phantasm proclaims Joker's time with the mob is an undeniable fact. Because this isn't a story that we're hearing from him. It's one we ourselves are seeing unfold. This movie is like, yo, for sure, Joker was 100% a mobster. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, you know I am not a fan of Joker being involved in organized crime. Quite frankly, because I think organized crime is a little bit too organized for the Joker.
Upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos. I'm an agent of chaos.
I don't really enjoy a definitive origin story for the Joker. But then again, there have been some tellings of the tales that I did enjoy. Mobster Joker ain't one of them. I get that the guy walks around with gelled hair and a suit, but I won't put him with Don Corleone just yet. I don't love that we see this version of the Clown Prince of Crime sans makeup taking orders from someone else. That is not a version of the Joker I ever want to see. And I hate even more that we still see him working casually alongside those people after whatever tragic trip to the circus turned him into the Joker. Even if it was just one big double cross, it's not for me. I do not care for it.
Okay. I don't like that. I don't like that.
Of course, with that being said, I'm not going to take too much away from this version of the Joker because he's being played once again by Mark Hamill.
Old Guano Man is wound tight enough to snap. Wouldn't it be great if I'd finally driven him off the deep end?
And once again, it is perfect. Marky Mark is still giving a great performance as always. I just really don't like how the movie chose to utilize him. If there's one thing I gotta give this movie credit for in regards to the Joker, it's that this appearance was quite iconic, because I remember owning about 4 or 5 different variations of a toy of this Joker. As a matter of fact, a year or so ago, my friend Reyes actually gave me a statue of this Joker. So shout out to him. Thanks for that. I struggle finding a lot to say about this movie. I want to shower it in its own unique praise, but then I'd feel like I'm just repeating myself in my upcoming Batman the Animated Series video. Because a lot of what makes this movie special are the same things that made the animated series so special. Those in charge have a complete understanding of these characters. So therefore, you get near perfect representations of who they are. And when this movie isn't properly spotlighting crazed clowns and dark defenders, it's creating and fleshing out all new original characters. Do I even have to get into the soundtrack? The music complements each and every scene. It's impossible to think of one action in this movie without the theme song that accompanies it. The movie does go over themes and elements that were already present in the animated series, but it doesn't do so at the expense of the movie's runtime or the audience's patience. It never comes off as too repetitive. Everything that's done in the film is done with purpose. So that brings us to our final question, which was also our first and only question. Is Batman Mask of the Phantasm the best Batman movie ever made? Well, ultimately I did really enjoy the movie. But I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as a lot of other people did. It's not a bad movie by any means. It's just that I have a real hard time calling it the best. Or even my favorite. It's still great. It is a great Batman movie. I just don't think that it's the greatest Batman movie. In my opinion. I think there's been better animated movies in the DCAU. And actually, come to think of it, I think that there have been better episodes of Batman the Animated Series than this. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I rewatched this movie and I now have an opinion on it. I certainly can appreciate just how good this is. And I totally get why some people would put it as number 1 on their lists. It's just not number 1 on mine. It's definitely floating around somewhere in the top 5, maybe just below it, but it's not the number 1 spot. For me, at least. This is one of those things that I think could have been made that much better had it been made more recently. There are a lot more creative freedoms that are given to writers of these projects than there were around this time. You want to have Batman beat people to a bloody pulp while shouting obscenities? Sure, go ahead, who cares, go nuts! You know, just as long as he's not going down on his longtime girlfriend, because then DC's gonna have to step in and we're gonna have a problem. Because we can market and sell a vengeful brutalizer in a terrifying bat costume. We can market that to children. But somebody who has consensual relations and is maybe, I don't know, a little bit selfless. Oh, you get that crap out of here. This is a family brand, goddammit. In all seriousness, I think like the show, this movie has a lot of mature themes that are somewhat dumbed down to be more accessible to a younger audience. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because, you know, luckily I was able to watch these and appreciate them as a child, and I'm able to rewatch them and appreciate them more in some cases as an adult. To me, it feels like the creators of this movie were trying to do a deep dive. They were unaware when they were going into it that Warner Brothers kind of gave them a kiddie pool to jump into. The writers had the ladder and the diving board and everything, but Warner Brothers showed up with like an inflatable kiddie pool. If this analogy is working for you. If not, I understand. Simply put, I like Batman the Mask of the Phantasm. I would even say I love Batman the Mask of the Phantasm. But I'm not in love with Batman the Mask of the Phantasm, if that makes any sense.
Your angel of death awaits.
And this is one of my all-time favorite Batman movies. I have such fondness and nostalgia for SubZero. I can remember watching and rewatching this time and time again, until my VHS tape completely wore. But it's been a while since I've seen it, hence me mentioning VHS tapes just a little bit ago. So let's find out if this movie still lives up to my childhood expectation. This movie follows the Batman the Animated Series timeline, taking place somewhere before the start of the new Batman adventures and the series redesigns, but also taking place after the original run of Batman the Animated Series. So this happens somewhere during the silent time skip between those two shows, which you may think is why they used the original art style rather than the redesign. But in actuality, this is because this movie was initially intended on being released a whole year earlier, before the redesigns even hit. Batman and Mr. Freeze SubZero was originally meant to tie into Batman and Robin, but after that movie was determined to be a total bat bomb, it was decided to hold off on releasing this, just to make sure it didn't follow in its predecessor's footsteps. Which was a good call, because this is too good to not be seen based on an unfair comparison. And I don't think this is exactly a hot take here, pun intended, but this continuity, these Batman shows and movies, take the source material much more seriously than Joel Schumacher's 2-hour toy commercial. So this movie, despite being a cartoon, is a much more mature and darker take on the world of Batman than the actual live-action Batman and Robin movie. SubZero takes place following Freeze's previous episodic encounters with the Dark Knight. So in case you haven't been keeping up, let me catch you up to date. Mr. Freeze was once a respected scientist. He was incredibly intelligent and gifted in the field of cryogenics. When his wife came down with a rare deadly disease, he placed her in a freezing cell with the hopes that he could one day awaken her with a cure for her mysterious ailment. His love for his wife quickly turned into obsession with keeping her alive. Every moment of every day became a race for a cure. That is, until his boss gained wind of this and decided to shut down his experiments and end Nora's life. A fight between the two ensued, which inevitably led to Freeze being covered in the freezing solution that he used to store his wife in, thus making him unable to survive in temperatures outside the Arctic. This of course transformed what was a loving man into a cold-hearted, cold-blooded villain. And without his passion to save his wife, his purpose became that of vengeance, seeking to show his former employer that revenge is a dish best served cold. Eventually he'd be stopped by the Dark Knight, and his wrongdoer would be arrested for his involvement in his creation. With those who wronged him paying dearly, Mr. Freeze would remain in Arkham peacefully, serving out his punishment, until sometime later when an aging entrepreneur sought him out to grant him immortality like himself, asking Mr. Freeze to create a frozen suit for him that would freeze his depleting cell structure. Of course, Mr. Freeze initially denied this, feeling the life he lives would not be a gift, but instead a curse. And also just because he flat out didn't want to do it. That is until that clever elderly businessman revealed that he had a bargaining chip. Nora Freeze, Victor's beloved wife, was still alive. Not necessarily well, but still alive. Ultimately, for the sake of his wife, he follows the man's orders, before eventually betraying him and disappearing with his unconscious wife. And that's pretty much where we last left the character. Fast forward to this movie, and Freeze is now living in the Arctic, where his only friends are his pet polar bears and this random kid that he decided to adopt. His sudden son doesn't have a whole lot to do, appearing in all of 2 or 3 scenes throughout, but I think the fact that Freeze would foster a child is a good indication that despite this man's cold demeanor, he's not soulless. This further grounds the character and provides more examples of the inconsistent compassion this man shows. It's clear that deep down he's still a good guy, even if, technically speaking, he is a bad guy. Mr. Freeze is without a doubt a criminal, but he's not exactly a full-fledged supervillain. He's not evil. He doesn't get joy out of hurting or harming others. He doesn't even want to hinder those he comes across. He's just willing to. The small amount of affection he shows the child and the animals in his care are just reminders that there is in fact a man under that frozen suit of armor. He's still very much motivated by his undying love for his wife and his need to keep her undying. But following an unfortunate accident with a submarine, Nora's pod is broken and her health rapidly declines as she remains unconscious. Set to make sure her sleep isn't eternal, Mr. Freeze enlists the help of a former colleague and top cryogenic scientist. In no uncertain ways, Belson, Mr. Freeze's colleague, tells him that Nora is in the need of a complete blood transfusion. And to make matters even worse, Nora has a rare blood type and will probably die within the week. Running out of time and options, Freeze and Belson decide to kidnap the Commissioner's daughter, Barbara, who shares her blood type. What I find interesting here is the inclusion of Barbara Gordon, but the absence of Batgirl. I mean, she's there for the character's introduction to the story, but then that suit is immediately forgotten after. Instead, this story puts an emphasis on Gordon in more of a damsel in distress role. It doesn't feel disingenuous or belittling to the character, as the circumstance makes sense and she handles herself pretty well throughout, but it is a notable choice. The character here is voiced by Mary Kay Bergman, for the first and only time ever. As before this, the character had been voiced by Melissa Gilbert in the first seasons of the show, and then later by Tara Strong in the sequel series and movies that followed this. And each one of these women sound completely different in the role. Like, none of them even make an effort in trying to sound like their predecessor. So every time someone new steps into the microphone booth, it's very noticeable. And it really feels like a completely different character each and every time. They're not just different sounding voices, they feel like different performances all around. Ultimately, the heroes of course would come in and save the day, saving Barbara's life, and even managing to get Nora a safe emergency blood transfusion, being able to do so without ending one life in order to save another. The movie ends with Freeze learning of his wife's survival and shedding a happy tear before walking off into obscurity, allowing the rest of the world to believe that he's no longer with them. And yeah, I'm just gonna say it. This movie is still great. Honestly, you just can't go wrong with Mr. Freeze in the Tim and Deanie-verse. The guy consistently was part of some of the best moments in the entire animated continuity. I have never seen an appearance of this character in this canon that I didn't love. Throughout the whole series run, from animated series to New Batman Adventures to Batman Beyond, Mr. Freeze only appeared 5 times, and that was more than enough to make a pretty impactful impression. Because within all of these appearances, you don't get anything short of the best of the character. There are no filler episodes with Mr. Freeze. No episode that pads out the season, or just some throwaway fodder. Every installment with this character is a further development of this character. And this is no exception. And I think that's why this movie tugs at my heartstrings, in addition to my nostalgia chords. Now you may have noticed I just went through an entire Batman movie review, all while barely mentioning Batman. And the truth of the matter is that's because Mr. Freeze steals the show. There is a reason this movie is officially titled Batman and Mr. Freeze, SubZero. And yeah, I'll be honest, I don't really like the title. I mean, Batman and Mr. Freeze? What is this, a buddy cop team-up flick? What are they gonna form some sort of an odd couple and go on missions together begrudgingly? Why is there an end? Batman versus Mr. Freeze seems like it would be more fitting. Yeah, why even include Mr. Freeze in the title? The subtitle of the movie is SubZero. I think we'd all get the picture. It was either Mr. Freeze or they've been planning a DC Mortal Kombat crossover for years and years before it actually happened. The end Mr. Freeze bit seems so unnecessary until you watch the movie. And then at that point, it's understood. Because this movie is actually more a Mr. Freeze movie than it is a Batman movie. This movie doesn't have a whole lot to do with Batman. There's no arc that he himself goes through. His literal job is just to figure things out and save the day. I mean, he's the hero of the story, sure, but Mr. Freeze is really the focal point here. We see much more of the bad guy than we do the good guy. And I can't really remember too many iconic Batman moments that happen in this beloved Batman movie. The best parts of the film have nothing to do with Batman. It's just Mr. Freeze working to save his wife, at any cost. And quite frankly, I don't really have a problem with that. Live-action Mr. Freeze origin movie went. It worked for the Joker, and we'll forget about Catwoman, but it worked for the Joker, so where's this guy's movie? Despite my love for it, I will say that this movie isn't perfect. There are some eyesores here and there, and it's definitely reminiscent of the time it came out. It uses a lot of technological techniques that were big back then and are either mostly unused now or used in a significantly better manner. Most of the animation is 2D, as God intended, of course, but there are objects and locations that are clearly made with poorly rendered CG 3D. And that's evident immediately in the opening. Right out of the gate, you're given this made-on PS2 iceberg and submarine, and quite frankly, I'm not here for it, but I will look past it because this movie is gluttonous in terms of quality. From brilliant voice performances that I will go much more into depth in a future video, to well-developed 2D characters with three-dimensional personalities and motivations. I don't just recommend watching SubZero. I highly recommend watching SubZero. It is one of my favorite outings with this character, and I think it's on par with some of the best episodes in the series.
Who are you? Why are you doing this?
You're the great detective. Figure it out.
This movie confused me a lot as a child. Batman Mystery of the Batwoman was a complete mystery to me growing up. First off, this movie is tied into the new Batman Adventures, which of course means that it's also tied into my beloved Batman the Animated Series and the world that surrounds those two shows. But this feature came out in 2003, several years after Batman Beyond had hit the scene, and even after his own solo outing against the Joker. So to see the continuity suddenly go backward for a one-off movie was kinda head-scratching. I mean, granted, the Justice League show was airing around the time, and that took place way before Batman Beyond, starring a very un-Terry McGinnis-like Bruce Wayne, but I was under the impression that that show was the exception, that we were gonna build toward the future. I was expecting to see more Batman Beyond movies, not more pre-Beyond Batman movies. Not that I was exactly complaining, because this is still my favorite Batman. Sorry, Terry, still love you though. But then add on top of all of that this film was introducing a brand new member of the Bat family, and my head was about to explode. Who was this character? Why have we never heard about her after this event? There was plenty of time where she could have been at least name-dropped somewhere along the way. Was she just not important enough to bring up? And if she wasn't important enough for a passing mention later in life, then why would I want to sit down and watch a whole-ass movie dedicated to the mystery that surrounds her? These were the thoughts that ran through my head at the time. Either way, I wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. More Batman is more Batman, and I'm here for more Batman. So despite my initial confusion, I was mostly really excited for this. And then I finally watched it and, that was a movie. For sure. I mean, you can't take that away from it. It's definitely a movie. Mystery of the Batwoman is exactly what it sounds like. There's a new winged vigilante taking to the streets and the skies of Gotham City. Only problem is, she wasn't sanctioned by the Dark Knight. She's more of a freelance solo crime fighter, who just so happens to also have an affinity for bats. In terms of the Batwoman look, it's fine enough, I guess. I mean, looking back on it now, I don't hate it, but it does sort of feel a little bit underwhelming. If you're introducing a new major character this late in the game, you would think that they would be a spectacular addition. You know, like all around, a complete package here. We're talking about from characterization to appearance. But not so much. The plain silver suit with a red bat logo just wasn't really doing it for me. I hated it as a kid, but that hatred has now boiled down to being content with it as an adult. It wouldn't have been my first choice, but it's definitely not the worst design I've seen on the series. I am, however, a fan of the little glider Batwoman rides on. It's different and a fun addition to the mythos. Though considering when this movie was made, I'm gonna guess that the team was more than a little bit inspired by the Spider-Man movie that came out a few years before.
Think about it!
Mystery of the Batwoman introduces us to 3 brand new female characters, new to the viewers and also new to Gotham City. This is of course because the reveal is that one of these women are the new masked vigilante. And if you haven't watched this movie yet, and spoilers would completely destroy your desire to see this, I'd take a break here. So why don't you go watch it and come back here when your hour and 22 is up. Okay, the rest of us will continue. Like I said, this movie introduces you to 3 brand new female characters, in an obvious attempt to get you to guess who. Because, you know, it's a mystery. Clearly, one of these 3 women is Batwoman, and the other 2 are red herrings. Or at least that's what you would be forgiven for thinking. Because as it turns out, this movie pulls a fast one on you, and tells you all 3 of them are actually Batwoman. This shocked the hell out of me as a kid. When I first watched this, I was almost entirely sure it was this chick. But then like 2 scenes later, I was like, it's this one. And then a scene after where that was debunked, I was like, it's gotta be this one, right? They threw me for a loop. I usually get these things, even at a young age, and I did not see this one coming. The movie plays with your mind like that. The eventual reveal that it was all 3 women working together does make sense, and I do like that this movie managed to get one over on me, doing so by thinking outside of the trope box. But it also does kind of feel like a little bit of a cheap trick. It worked, and I'm going to give it a pass, but you only get one, so don't try this again, because I will be far less forgiving. The troublesome trio consists of Sonya, Rocky, and Kathy, and if there's one big positive that this movie has, it's that all 3 are played pretty well by their voice actresses. And that's in spite of one of them being played by Kelly Ripa. Ripa plays Roxy, minus the Rocket, who is a highly intelligent doctor, and also a little bit of a klutz. It's because of her lack of coordination and cool that she's genuinely not thought of as a possibility. But as time goes on, it becomes clear that she's more than just your standard garden variety computer geek. She can also defend herself because she's well trained in hand-to-hand combat. It's also actually her technology that Batwoman, or should I say, the Batwomen, use on their missions. Her motivation comes from her love of her boyfriend, who is now doing time after being framed by the Penguin. She dons the cowl with the hopes that one day she could find evidence that would set her man free. Next in line is Kathy Duquesne, whose name is oddly similar to the original Batwoman, Kathy Kane. And also similar to the later Batwoman, Kate Kane, who is not the same character despite having very similar names. They're also not related either. Kathy is the wild child of the bunch, the loose cannon, the wild card, if you will. Being the daughter of a wealthy mob boss, she provided the funds for the Batwoman initiative. Kathy denounces her father's business after a bullet meant for him took the life of her mother. She complied with the scheme in an effort to get back at her father. Lastly is Sonya Alkanya, which I may be saying wrong because I suck, so in advance I'm sorry. She was the brains behind the whole Batwoman operation. She's attributed by Batman as being the will to make everything happen, which I would think is fairly accurate. She does what she does to avenge her family's business that was ruined by Rupert Thorne. Like the rest of the movie, the character of Sonya is also deeply confusing to me, because this character replaces Renee Montoya as being Detective Bullock's new partner, but she also just replaces Renee Montoya. This is like Diet Renee. They have similar attitudes and personalities and even wear similar clothing. If I was shown this character model without any context, I would just assume that she was a redesign of Montoya. It seems so pointless to have replaced one established character with an unestablished character that is basically her doppelganger. The only reason I can think of to make sense of all this is that this character was brought in because the writers didn't want to make Renee Batwoman. Which, by the way, I think would have actually been dope. Do you have any idea how much more I'd care about this character if underneath the mask she was secretly already a name on the show? I would care about this significantly more. Hell, if the twist was that Renee Montoya was Batwoman, I think it would have completely changed my outlook on this whole movie. I would have never seen something like that coming. Take me to that alternate universe where that's a reality. Anyway, there's nothing bad about Sonya. I like the character, and I like the actress's performance behind the character, but I mostly find her to be a tired attempt at recreating a character that she's supposed to be replacing. Which, ironically enough, is also how I kind of feel about Batwoman in this. It's already been done, and it's been done better. This whole movie just feels like a tired rehash of the original Batgirl arc. A female outsider who takes the bat name in ears, and then takes to the streets to stop wrongdoers? Yeah, that's Batgirl. That is literally just Batgirl. The show already did this, and it was better when they did. I mean, granted, that arc didn't have a great whodunit like this movie tries to do, but it's still pretty much the same thing. The movie does at least attempt to address this by having Batgirl call in from college and question it. And I give the movie points for being a little bit self-aware, but I'm also immediately deducting points because this movie, to my knowledge, is the first to really canonize the Batgirl-Batman relationship, having Barbara very blatantly call in to flirt with the Caped Crusader and try and make a pass at him. Yeah, so thanks for that lovely reminder of something I didn't want to be reminded of. You know, I like to go back and watch these things, but there's certain aspects here and there that I like to act like didn't happen. And this is all of them. And I know I said a lot of negative things, but make no mistake, this movie does have some solid qualities to it. The mystery angle allows Batman to play detective, which is something missing in a lot of Batman outings. You'd think the character who's called the world's greatest detective would have a lot of detective work, but you'd be surprised how often people forget about that in lieu of Batman punching somebody until he bleeds. The characters are very well betrayed as always, and the new additions fit in well with the rest of the extended universe. They fit in so well that it's kinda disappointing that we never get any kind of an update on any of them. And most importantly, the inclusion and emphasis put on Penguin and Rupert Thorne is pretty nice, especially considering that the two of them would be used considerably less over time as the series went on, with Penguin only being used in a handful of appearances following the new Batman adventures, and Rupert Thorne never even made it to that new series following the end of the original run. This is actually his first and only appearance in the later continuity, hence why the character here is slightly redesigned to better fit in with the new animation style. And in terms of soundtrack, this movie's got it. That one song used in the Iceberg Lounge is an extreme earworm. It gets stuck in my head every time I rewatch it, and then it stays in there for a few days after. I think Kathy's relationship with her father is definitely a highlight. It's like watching young resentment freeze over and having understanding and compassion thaw over an icy relationship. I like that despite being a mob boss and despite having his daughter turn against him, Carlton still saves her, showing that he's a man before he's a bad guy. He's still a human being, and his bad affiliations don't mean nearly as much as the love he has for his family. That's kind of beautiful. This plot point isn't harped on incredibly, and the little screen time we get of it really feels like the perfect amount. The movie doesn't shove the narrative thread down your throat, it just plays it out in passing. It's perfectly done, as too much emphasis on this would probably be a little bit less compelling and ultimately feel like overkill, only managing to weigh this plot down. But most importantly, this movie gave us this moment.
Somebody in here? Something wrong? Nope.
And come on, that's just perfect. I love it. When all is said and done, Kathy's father goes to prison, but their relationship is mended, while Roxy's boyfriend is released due to evidence Batman hands over. Sonia is found out and leaves the station, and Bruce pursues Kathy because, let's face it, this movie really betrayed her as a second-rate Catwoman, so that makes sense. And ultimately, this is yet another Batman movie where Batman really isn't the focal point. He's just the character that the plot plays out in front of. So overall, I don't think Mystery of the Batwoman is bad, but it does border on unnecessary. It's weird to me that the creators decided to hop in their metaphoric DeLorean and go back in the timeline to make this, when it doesn't really have any effect on the events that came before or after it. It ultimately feels like unneeded fluff and filler for the larger continuity, and I don't think it really did anybody any favors. This was fine as it is, I guess, but it didn't really add anything to the world at large. I definitely don't feel like this was a story that just needed to be told. This movie really didn't need to be tied into this continuity, and honestly, I don't even know that it needed to exist at all. Look, all I'm saying is that maybe there's a reason the other two films in this lineup are included in my Blu-ray complete series, and yet Mystery of the Batwoman is mysteriously missing. I want to once again emphasize that this is not bad, but it's also nowhere near as good as the other movies in its canon. In terms of quality, I would say that this is definitely on the lower end of the original DCAU. But to be fair, this is a historically great continuity that we're talking about here. I would definitely recommend you checking this out yourself, maybe giving your own take. I can imagine other people finding this movie more entertaining than I did. I guess I'd recommend this movie, but I wouldn't highly recommend this movie. So if you haven't already, go check it out and let me know what you thought. In the meantime, if you like this video and want to see more content of Batman the Animated Series, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying... With that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.